More than half of visa refusals in the UK now happen without a single headline, protest, or press conference, and most people only discover it when a renewal email quietly says no. Here's the uncomfortable question no one is asking. What if the UK didn't change immigration with force, but with silence? No mass removals. No dramatic announcements. Just small rule adjustments, tighter checks, and automated decisions that slowly close doors. Policy data and migration trends show a clear pattern. Enforcement is shifting from borders to systems, from airports to inboxes. That's what makes 2026 different. This isn't about panic or fear. It's about understanding a system that's changing quietly, deliberately, and efficiently. And once you see how it works, you can stop guessing and start planning. Number 1. What changed? Most people think immigration changes happen with loud announcements. New bans, new routes, big political speeches. But what actually changed for 2026 isn't something you'd easily spot in a headline. The real shift is hidden in the mechanics of the system. On the surface, the rules look familiar. The visa categories still exist, the application portals are still live, and the official language sounds reassuring. But underneath, the way decisions are made has quietly evolved. Instead of focusing on who enters the country, the system is now built around who stays. That single change alters everything. The pressure point has moved from borders to renewals. For many migrants already living and working in the UK, the moment of risk is no longer arrival day, it's renewal time. This is where compliance checks, salary thresholds, and documentation accuracy suddenly matter far more than before. Small gaps that once passed unnoticed, slight income fluctuations, job title mismatches, short contract extensions, are now flagged automatically. These are not dramatic violations. They're everyday realities of modern work. Yet in a tighter system, they can quietly end a visa pathway. Another major change is how thresholds are being used. Salary and income requirements haven't just increased, they've become less flexible. Where caseworkers once had room to assess context, algorithms now apply rigid benchmarks. Being close to the requirement is no longer good enough. You either meet it at the exact moment of assessment, or you don't. For people managing families, mortgages, or variable pay, this turns routine life changes into immigration risks. So why do most people miss this phase? Because nothing appears broken until it suddenly is. There's no warning siren when compliance standards tighten. No notification when enforcement priorities shift. Life continues normally until an application is reviewed under rules that quietly changed months earlier. That delay between policy change and personal impact is what makes this moment so dangerous. By the time many people realize the system has moved, they're already standing on the wrong side of the line. Number 2. Early cities. When immigration rules change quietly, they don't roll out evenly across the country. They appear first in places where systems are strongest, data is densest, and compliance can be monitored without friction. That's why London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Leeds are the early pressure points. These cities aren't targeted because of politics or population size alone. They're chosen because they allow the system to work at full speed. Every employer record, rental agreement, tax filing, and digital check connects more easily here than anywhere else in the UK. London leads this shift because it already runs on layered verification. Employers are closely monitored, housing records are digitized, and visa holders interact with multiple databases at once: HMRC, landlords, banks, and local councils. When one detail changes, the system notices. A delayed payslip, a short-term contract, or a change of address can ripple across records. Birmingham follows closely, not because of visibility, but because of enforcement efficiency. The city has a high concentration of sponsored workers and small to medium employers, making it a testing ground for compliance audits and sponsor license checks. Manchester and Leeds represent a different angle. These cities sit at the intersection of universities, healthcare, logistics, and tech sectors that rely heavily on migrant labor. That concentration allows authorities to observe patterns, which employers stretch rules, which roles hover near salary thresholds, and which housing arrangements raise flags. The goal isn't mass removal. It's risk filtering. By tightening checks where data is richest, the system identifies borderline cases early, long before any national crackdown is visible. Housing records play a growing role in this process. In major cities, tenancy data is increasingly linked to identity verification and residency status. Overcrowding, frequent address changes, or informal rental arrangements don't just create housing issues, they create compliance questions. Combined with employer reporting, this builds a quiet but powerful enforcement web. This is why people in these cities often feel the impact first. Not because they've done something wrong, but because they live where systems talk to each other best. And once those systems are proven to work smoothly in major cities, they rarely stay contained there for long. Number 3. Skilled workers. For skilled workers, the biggest shock of the 2026 changes is realizing that a stable job no longer guarantees a stable immigration status. Many professionals assume that once they're employed, paying tax, and contributing to the economy, their position is secure. But the system now looks far more closely at how that job is defined, paid, and classified. Salary thresholds are no longer just a minimum target, they are a fixed gate. Falling even slightly below it at the wrong moment can quietly end a visa pathway. This risk is especially visible in places like Reading, Cambridge, and Milton Keynes, where knowledge-based jobs dominate. These cities are full of tech specialists, researchers, consultants, and project-based professionals whose income doesn't always move in straight lines. Bonuses, stock options, variable hours, or short-term contracts may look perfectly reasonable in modern employment, but the immigration system often doesn't see them that way. It sees base salary figures, standard job codes, and rigid classifications. Job reclassification has become a hidden danger. Roles that once qualified as skilled can be re-evaluated under updated occupation codes. A title change, a shift in responsibilities, or even a company restructuring can move a role into a different category without the employee realizing it. The work itself doesn't change, but its classification does, and that can affect eligibility overnight. Many people only discover this after submitting a renewal, when the system compares their role against newer, stricter definitions. The gap between stable job and stable status is where stress quietly builds. Professionals continue their daily routines, meetings, deadlines, long commutes, unaware that their immigration standing is being reassessed through automated checks. There's no warning email when a role becomes borderline. No alert when income structure becomes risky. Life feels settled, but the foundation is slowly shifting. What makes this especially difficult is that skilled workers often have the most to lose. Careers, families, and long-term plans are deeply rooted. Yet the system no longer measures contribution in broad terms. It measures compliance in precise ones. And in a system built on exact thresholds and definitions, even highly valued professionals can find themselves unexpectedly vulnerable. Number 4. Family pressure. For many people, bringing family to the UK once felt like a step toward stability. Dependents were seen as proof of long-term commitment, integration, and responsibility. But under the newer immigration framework moving toward 2026, that logic has quietly flipped. Family members no longer automatically strengthen a case. In many situations, they increase scrutiny. What was once a safety net has become a pressure point, especially for households balancing income, rent, and everyday living costs. This shift is becoming visible in cities like Leicester, Luton, and Bradford, where multi-generational households and family-based visas are common. The rules haven't dramatically changed on paper, but the way income and housing requirements are enforced has tightened. It's no longer just about earning enough, in general terms. Authorities now look at whether income consistently meets specific thresholds after accounting for dependents. Overtime, bonuses, or second jobs that once helped families qualify are increasingly treated as unreliable. Housing checks add another layer of pressure. In areas where rental markets are already stretched, families often rely on shared or flexible living arrangements. But frequent address changes, informal agreements, or crowded properties can trigger questions about compliance. A home that works perfectly well for a family's daily life may not meet the system's expectations on paper. When housing records are reviewed alongside visa renewals, these details matter more than many people realize. The emotional weight of this shift is heavy. Parents find themselves calculating every decision, job changes, moving homes, even having another child, through the lens of immigration risk. Families who feel settled in their communities suddenly face uncertainty, not because of wrongdoing, but because the system now evaluates family life as a financial and logistical liability. What makes this phase easy to miss is how normal everything feels until it doesn't. School runs continue. Workdays pass as usual. Then a renewal arrives, and the rules feel sharper than expected. For many families, the pressure doesn't come from a single rule. It comes from how income, housing, and dependence are quietly assessed together, turning ordinary family life into a complex compliance challenge. Number 5. Student Trap. 4 years, studying in the UK was seen as the first step in a longer journey. Education leading to work, experience, and eventually stability. That expectation is now quietly breaking down. The rules don't say students must leave after graduation, but the pathways forward have narrowed so much that many find themselves trapped between qualification and opportunity. This shift is especially noticeable in Nottingham, Sheffield, and Coventry, cities built around universities and graduate-driven local economies. The main challenge comes after the degree is finished. While post-study options still exist on paper, the transition into sponsored work has become far more difficult. Employers are increasingly reluctant to sponsor graduates, not because they doubt their skills, but because sponsorship now carries higher costs, stricter reporting duties, and greater risk. For smaller companies, taking on a graduate who needs sponsorship feels like an administrative burden rather than an investment, even in sectors facing skill shortages. Graduates often assume their qualification alone makes them competitive. In reality, employers are filtering candidates based on how sponsorship-safe they appear. That means preference goes to applicants who already have the right to work without restrictions. The result is a quiet exclusion. Job rejections come without explanation, and the real reason, visa complexity, is rarely stated openly. Over time, this creates a sense of stagnation, where graduates are qualified, capable, and eager to contribute, yet unable to move forward. In cities like Nottingham, Sheffield, and Coventry, this problem is amplified by the local job market. Many graduate roles sit just below salary thresholds required for sponsorship, especially in creative, research, and entry-level technical fields. Even when offers are made, they may not meet the precise criteria needed to extend a stay. The difference between being allowed to remain and having to leave can come down to a few £1,000s on a contract. What makes this a trap is timing. By the time students realize how narrow the path has become, their options are already shrinking. Visa clocks keep ticking, employers hesitate, and uncertainty grows. The system doesn't push students out directly. It simply stops pulling them forward, leaving many highly trained graduates stuck at a dead end they never expected to face. Number 6. Employer power. One of the most important but least discussed changes in the immigration system is the quiet transfer of power from the state to employers. Businesses have effectively become gatekeepers, controlling who can stay not through visas directly, but through contracts, reporting duties, and internal decisions. This shift is especially visible in places like Slough and Wolverhampton, where logistics, manufacturing, healthcare, and service industries rely heavily on sponsored workers. On paper, nothing looks dramatic. There are no mass layoffs tied to immigration policy, no public notices telling workers to leave. Instead, the system works through everyday workplace processes. Contracts aren't renewed. Hours are reduced. Roles are restructured or quietly removed. From an HR perspective, these are normal business decisions. From an immigration perspective, they can end a person's right to remain in the UK without a single formal rejection. Employers now carry significant compliance risk. Sponsoring a worker means ongoing monitoring, reporting changes in pay, hours, or job role, and responding to audits. For many companies, especially smaller ones, this risk outweighs the benefit of retaining a sponsored employee. The result is caution. When budgets tighten or projects end, sponsored workers are often the first to be let go, not because of performance, but because of paperwork. In cities like Slough, where many workers are tied to large distribution and industrial employers, short-term contracts are common. A missed renewal or a gap between contracts can trigger immigration consequences that are difficult to reverse. Wolverhampton faces a similar challenge, with sectors that fluctuate based on demand. Employers protect themselves by minimizing exposure, even if that means losing skilled, experienced staff. What makes this shift so powerful is its silence. Workers don't receive a notice saying their immigration status is at risk. They receive a standard HR email, a meeting about business needs, a polite explanation about restructuring. By the time the immigration impact becomes clear, the decision has already been made. In this system, staying isn't just about meeting government rules anymore. It's about remaining a low-risk option in an employer's compliance calculations. Number 7. Quiet exits. Not everyone who leaves the UK under tightening immigration rules is forced out. In fact, a growing number of departures happen quietly, by choice, at least on the surface. These are quiet exits, driven less by rejection letters and more by psychological fatigue. Constant uncertainty wears people down. When every contract renewal, address change, or pay adjustment feels like a potential risk, life becomes a continuous waiting room. This uncertainty has a powerful mental cost. People begin to live cautiously, delaying decisions that most adults take for granted. Buying a home feels risky. Changing jobs feels dangerous. Even planning holidays or long-term projects feels uncertain. Over time, this state of limbo drains energy and focus. Productivity suffers not because people care less, but because part of their mental bandwidth is always reserved for what if. What if the rules change again? What if the renewal fails? What if this is the last year? For many professionals and families, the decision to leave comes before any official trigger. They run the numbers, weigh the emotional toll, and realize that living under constant review is reshaping their lives. The system doesn't tell them to go. It simply makes staying feel unstable. Leaving becomes a way to regain control, even if it means starting over elsewhere. In this sense, quiet exits are not impulsive. They are deeply rational responses to prolonged uncertainty. The impact on life planning is profound. People stop investing fully in their communities, workplaces, and relationships because the future feels conditional. Career ambition narrows to short-term survival. Long-term goals are postponed indefinitely. Over time, this erodes not just individual well-being, but the sense of belonging that once anchored people to the country. What makes quiet exits difficult to measure is their invisibility. There's no crisis moment, no public debate. Just a gradual thinning of people who decide they'd rather build a future somewhere they can plan 5 or 10 years ahead. In a system designed to manage risk efficiently, uncertainty becomes a tool. And for many, the moment clarity disappears is the moment staying no longer feels worth the cost. Number 8. Who's safe? When immigration rules tighten, the natural question is always the same. Who is safe? The honest answer is uncomfortable. No one is guaranteed safety, only varying levels of stability. Under the system taking shape toward 2026, security is measured less by intention or contribution and more by how neatly someone fits into predefined criteria. Some people sit closer to the center of those criteria, which gives them breathing room, but even that comes with limits. Relative stability is most often found among individuals in high income, clearly defined roles with long, uninterrupted records. These are professionals whose salaries sit comfortably above thresholds, whose job titles align cleanly with approved classifications, and whose employment history shows consistency. Long-term residence also matters. A record free of gaps, late filings, or frequent changes reduces risk, not because it proves loyalty, but because it signals predictability to the system. Cities like Edinburgh and Bristol tend to offer more of this relative stability. Their economies are anchored in sectors such as finance, engineering, research, healthcare, and public services, where roles are well-defined and salaries are less volatile. Employers in these cities are often larger, better resourced, and more familiar with compliance requirements. That doesn't eliminate risk, but it reduces exposure to sudden changes triggered by small discrepancies. However, stability here should not be confused with immunity. Even those in strong positions remain dependent on ongoing compliance. A role change, a drop in income, or a restructuring can quickly shift someone from safe to borderline. The system does not reward past contribution in the way people expect. It evaluates current status at specific checkpoints, often without much flexibility. What makes this phase particularly deceptive is comfort. When life feels settled, people stop paying close attention. Renewals become routine. Documentation feels like a formality. Yet the rules are no longer forgiving of oversight. Stability exists, but it is conditional and constantly reassessed. Understanding this distinction matters. Being relatively safe does not mean being unaffected. It means having time to adapt, to plan, and to respond if conditions change. In a system that values precision over empathy, that extra margin can make all the difference, but it should never be mistaken for a permanent shield. Number 9. Smart moves. In a system that changes quietly and evaluates people continuously, the smartest response is not panic, but preparation. There are practical moves individuals can take now to reduce risk and regain a sense of control. The first is documentation discipline. Many problems don't come from eligibility itself, but from inconsistencies, outdated contracts, mismatched job titles, incomplete records, or missing evidence of income. Keeping documents aligned across payslips, contracts, tax records, and visa details is no longer optional. Small discrepancies that once went unnoticed can now trigger deeper scrutiny. Income structure is another critical area. It's not just how much you earn, but how that income is presented. Variable pay, bonuses, commissions, and overtime may support real life, but they often weaken a visa case. Where possible, clarity and predictability matter more than flexibility. Understanding which parts of income are counted, and when, allows people to anticipate problems before they appear at renewal time. This is especially important for those close to minimum thresholds, where timing can be the difference between approval and refusal. Employer risk is often overlooked. Not all jobs carry the same level of immigration exposure. Large, well-established employers with experience in compliance tend to provide more stability than smaller organizations navigating sponsorship for the first time. Changes inside a company, mergers, restructures, funding cuts, can affect sponsored workers faster than anyone expects. Staying informed about an employer's compliance history and future plans is now part of personal risk management, not disloyalty. Location still matters more than many realize. Living and working in cities where enforcement is more aggressive or data systems are more integrated can increase exposure to checks. In some cases, moving to a region with fewer compliance pressures or more stable industries can reduce risk, even if the rules are technically the same nationwide. Geography doesn't change the law, but it changes how intensely it's applied. None of these steps guarantee safety, but together they create resilience. In a system designed to reward predictability, being proactive turns uncertainty into something manageable. The goal isn't to outsmart the rules, it's to understand how they operate, and to position yourself so small changes don't quietly derail your future. Number 10. The reality. At first glance, the changes unfolding in the UK's immigration landscape can feel chaotic. Rules tightening here, enforcement increasing there, uncertainty spreading everywhere. But when you step back, a clearer picture emerges. This is not disorder. It is system design. The direction is deliberate, structured, and quietly efficient. Instead of dramatic policy shifts, the system now relies on precision, data, and process to regulate who stays and who leaves. That makes it harder to spot, but also far more effective. The design is built around predictability. Automated checks, fixed thresholds, and standardized definitions reduce discretion and remove emotional judgment. From the system's perspective, this isn't harsh, it's efficient. From a human perspective, it can feel cold and unforgiving. The key mistake many people make is assuming that silence means safety. In reality, silence often means the system is working exactly as intended, without drawing attention to itself. This is where awareness becomes powerful. Once people understand that the pressure isn't random, they stop reacting emotionally to every rumor or headline. Awareness restores a sense of control because it replaces fear with clarity. Instead of asking, "What if something suddenly changes?" the question becomes, "How does the system evaluate me right now?" That shift in thinking is critical. It turns uncertainty into something that can be assessed and managed. Calm planning consistently outperforms panic reactions. Panic leads to rushed decisions, quitting jobs too early, moving without strategy, or ignoring long-term consequences. Calm planning, on the other hand, allows people to make measured choices, aligning income structures, strengthening documentation, understanding employer risk, and thinking ahead rather than just surviving the next renewal. These actions don't fight the system, they work within it. The reality is that no one benefits from seeing the system as an enemy. It doesn't respond to emotion, intention, or contribution in the way people expect. It responds to compliance, clarity, and consistency. Recognizing this doesn't make the situation easier, but it makes it navigable. In a landscape shaped by quiet rules and invisible thresholds, understanding the design is the difference between feeling powerless and moving forward with purpose. If this video made you pause and rethink where you stand, share your thoughts below. Which city or visa route feels most uncertain for you right now? If you want to stay ahead instead of reacting late, watch my previous UK 2026 planning video where I break down what comes next and how people are adapting calmly. We put serious research and effort into making these breakdowns clear and honest, so if this helped you, support the channel by subscribing. It's just one click.